Coming up on Arirang News. For the first time, South Korea has forged diplomatic relations with Cuba. Known as a close ally of Pyongyang, Seoul senior official says this will inevitably cause a political and psychological blow to the regime. Doctors in South Korea are holding massive nationwide rallies, strongly opposing the government's plan to raise medical school enrollment quota, a first collective action since the government's decision. In a meeting held by the Korean Football Association, officials have called for the sacking of the men's national team head coach, Jurgen Klinsmann. He has been under fire to resign following the country's disappointing performance at the Asian Cup. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with South Korea establishing official diplomatic ties with the communist state Cuba, also known as a longtime ally of North Korea. This was confirmed in a surprise announcement overnight. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji leads us off.
Cuba has become the 193rd country in the world to form diplomatic relations with South Korea. In a surprise announcement on Wednesday night, Seoul's foreign ministry said the United Nations representatives for the two countries exchanged official letters in New York, calling it a crucial turning point.
The establishment of diplomatic relations with Cuba, the only country in the Central American and Caribbean region with which we did not have diplomatic ties, is expected to serve as an important turning point in our efforts to strengthen diplomacy in the Latin American region.
This leaves Syria as the only country among UN member states that does not have diplomatic ties with South Korea. Cuba didn't, mainly because it has been and continues to be a close ally of North Korea. The North established diplomatic ties with Cuba in 1960, and Cuba still has an embassy in Pyongyang. The South Korean government has worked on improving relations with the communist-run island for the past 20 years. Growing popularity of Korean culture, such as K-pop and K-dramas in Cuba in recent years, also added momentum. With South Korea and Cuba agreeing to open diplomatic relations, North Korea is expected to become more isolated on the global stage. In fact, a senior official from the presidential office told reporters on Thursday that North Korea will inevitably face a political and psychological blow. By forging formal ties, South Korea also hopes to expand economic cooperation with Cuba. Seoul's foreign ministry said this is expected to help support Korean companies doing business in Cuba. As of 2022, the trade volume between the two countries amounted to approximately $14 million in exports and $7 million in imports. Also, Seoul aims to provide consular assistance to Koreans visiting Cuba. Before the pandemic, around 14,000 Koreans visited Cuba annually. And there are about 1,000 people descended from Koreans who moved to Mexico in 1921 during Japan's colonial rule who are currently living in Cuba. Peunji, Arirang News.
North Korea says, under its leader Kim Jong-un's guidance, the regime test-fired a new surface-to-sea missile on Wednesday morning. Kim also calls for a stronger military readiness along the western maritime border, claiming that the South is violating the North's sovereignty. Our defense correspondent Kim Jongs has details.
North Korea test-fired a new surface-to-sea missile on Wednesday morning under the supervision of its leader Kim Jong-un. The regime state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that Pyongyang test-launched its new missile named Padasuri-6. The missile reportedly flew for 1,400 seconds, a little over 23 minutes, over waters in the East Sea to hit a target. Considering the flight time, the missile is estimated to have flown around 200 kilometers. Experts believe the Padasuri-6 is an upgrade of North Korea's version of Russia's Kh-35 Uran anti-ship missile. Following the North's report, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff expressed confidence in countering North Korea's threats.
Our military is thoroughly equipped to detect and intercept North Korea's missiles against South Korea.
Kim also ordered a stronger military defense posture in waters north of South Korea's Yeonpyeong and Baekneungdo Islands along the western maritime border. Kim's order comes as he accused South Korean warships of frequently invading its waters by defending the northern limit line, the de facto inter-Korean maritime border, which the regime does not recognize. The North Korean leader warned that Pyongyang would regard the South's violation as an infringement of its sovereignty and an act of military provocation, leading to the use of force. South Korea's military, however, reiterated that the NLL will remain unchanged.
The NLL is our military's unchanging maritime border, and our military will be fully prepared to respond resolutely to any provocation.
Seoul's military detected the latest launch at around 9 a.m. Wednesday. This is the regime's 5th cruise missile launch this year. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues Julie Turner met today South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, during which she said Washington plans to work closely with Seoul to promote human rights in the regime. This as she's visiting Seoul to discuss ways to help improve the situation in the north. Cho said he hopes they can further deepen cooperation on this matter on the global stage, especially as South Korea and Japan currently serve as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council, of which the U.S. is a permanent member. Now, doctors in South Korea were out on the picket line this evening to protest the expansion of the medical school enrollment quota. Our Health Ministry correspondent Choi Soo-hyung was at one of the rallies.
It has been more than a week since the government decided to raise the medical school enrollment quota by 2,000 per year, starting in 2025. The police were on high alert on Thursday because 16 medical associations nationwide staged simultaneous protests all over the country. Also on Thursday, the leader of the Korean Intern Resident Association and one intern at St. Mary's Hospital in Daejeon submitted resignation letters, although neither have been accepted. Meanwhile, tensions have growing among medical students with some planning to take the semester off. Doctors are concerned about the quality of education being impacted due to a lack of classrooms, practical training space and professors in each school. Also, they insist that an expanded quota cannot be a fundamental solution to break long-standing issues like a shortage of essential healthcare personnel, pediatricians.
The number of students becoming doctors continues to be 3,000 a year. The shortage of pediatricians isn't due to an overall lack of doctors, but the doctors specializing in pediatrics switch to other specialities. It is a matter of the government's policy, not an actual shortage.
In response, the government acknowledges the doctors' efforts to save people's lives, while their concerns center on what will happen to the healthcare field if trainee doctors or medical students take collective action. Currently, the Health Ministry prohibits collective action by doctors and has warned of the possibility of licenses being revoked if they do not follow a ministry's immediate return to work order in the event of a strike. The government's firm stance seems to be a factor for doctors taking a cautious approach. Under these circumstances, the Health Ministry says that large-scale strikes may not actually happen.
We will absolutely not create a situation where the lives and health of the people are threatened. It is not appropriate to discuss specific plans here at this point, because the strike has not taken place yet, and the possibility of large-scale strikes becoming a reality is, in my view, not very high.
The Health Ministry will plan to expand non-face-to-face treatment options in preparation for a future strike. The government are ready for negotiations at any time with doctors. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
In sports, the Korea Football Association National Team Committee, after a long meeting on Thursday, agreed to suggest the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, the head coach of the men's national team. Amid growing concerns of the public, the association's chairman has the final call. A meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday to decide on Klinsmann's future. Our Lee Eun-hee reports.
The Korea Football Association National Team Committee on Thursday agreed to suggest the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, the head coach of the men's national team. However, the final call can only be made by the Korea Football Association's president, Chung Mong-gyu. The committee announced its decision at a press briefing at the KFA headquarters in Seoul, citing concerns about Klinsmann's leadership skills and tactics.
For various reasons, there was a conclusion that Coach Klinsmann can no longer serve as the leader of the national team and needs to be replaced.
Director Hwang Bo-gan, a former player and coach himself, added that some saw Klinsmann's lack of commitment as he was mostly working in the U.S., where he lives, and not spending much time in South Korea, as disrespectful towards the Korean public. Klinsmann attended via video link as he had already returned to his home in the U.S. and reportedly said during the session that he was unaware that a committee meeting was due to take place. After South Korea lost 2-0 to Jordan in the semi-final of the Asian Cup in Qatar this month, this content began to grow among the fans due to Klinsmann's perceived lack of tactical acumen. In addition, the recent admission of a fallout between some of the players in the build-up to the Jordan match has further raised concerns regarding the coach's man management abilities, particularly as it appeared to impact the team's performance. Amid growing voice for KFA's president to take responsibility for hiring Klinsmann and resign from the head of the association, the chairman has been selected as a candidate for the AFC Executive Committee election, which takes place in May 2024. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
Korea's tech exports last month noted a two-digit expansion on-year for the first time in 20 months, largely driven by semiconductor shipments. Here's our economics correspondent, An Sung-jin.
A strong chip performance pulled up South Korea's tech exports once again. With a steady increase in outbound shipments of semiconductors, which began last November, the country's ICT exports saw a surplus of $4.5 billion for the month of January. Data from the Trade Ministry on Thursday show that the value of exports stood at $16.35 billion, which is a 25% on-year increase. This is the first time that exports increased by double digits since May 2022. The figure has been attributed to an increase in semiconductor exports, which climbed by 53%. Memory chip exports, which jumped by 90% compared to the year before, and a rise in the average unit prices of DRAM chips pushed up the value of chip exports. Increased shipments of displays for high-value added products such as TVs and laptops also added to the growth in the value of ICT exports. Alongside outbound shipments of semiconductors and displays, computers and telecommunication devices all climbed by more than 25% on-year as well. However, mobile industry exports saw a drop of nearly 10% year-on-year due to weaker demand as well as a high base effect from the year before. By country, South Korea's tech exports saw an increase in shipments to most countries, including China, Vietnam, the United States, and Japan, while shipments to the European Union were also up. This was once again led by a strong performance of semiconductor exports. China is South Korea's largest ICT export destination, with nearly 50% of outbound shipments heading there. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
A major economic hurdle for South Korea to overcome this year is the country's equity market, or stocks, that's been devalued by what's called the Korea discount. The government is set to propose a new reform to tackle this ongoing issue later this month. Our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
제 임기 중에 글로벌 스탠다드에 맞지 않는 자본시장의 규제는 과감하게 혁파해서 글로벌 증시 수준으로 코리아 디스카운트를 해소할 것입니다.
President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged to reform the country's stock market, starting with a short-selling ban last year and following up with a new program that's to come. Korea discount refers to a phenomenon in which the value of companies listed on the Korean stock market is lower than that of other major countries. And it's a very real issue. According to the Korea Exchange, the PB ratio of the country's benchmark Kospi is one of the lowest out of the 38 OECD member countries. PB stands for price-to-book ratio, and it shows the market valuation of a company compared to its book value. If the PB ratio is lower than 1, it means that the company's current stock value is lower than the money left from selling its assets. A general outline of the corporate value-up program was released last month, and it aims to increase the value of stocks with low PB ratios. While the finer details will be announced sometime later this month, it is already affecting the market. The Kospi Composite Index surged from the 2,400 mark to over 2,620 over the past few weeks, and foreign investments began piling in. In February so far, offshore investors bought nearly $4.5 billion worth of local stocks, which is the fifth largest monthly sum to date, despite only being halfway through the month. Experts are hopeful about what the program could continue to do for the market once it goes into effect.
We can look forward to an increase in capital efficiency and greater ROE for firms with low PB ratios, leading to a rise in PB ratios for these firms.
But some are wary that this could die down just as quickly and that they will need to be followed up with policies over a period of time.
They have to be followed by further reforms and further commitment by Korean companies and the Korean government that stockholders' value will be respected. Because the Korean discount has lasted for decades, any short-term programs are not going to be able to eliminate Korean discount.
There are also concerns that as the current program looks as though it will be more of an advisory than an enforcement, requiring firms to set target goals, it could fall flat. Further details will be needed to see how the government plans to address these concerns. 문혜련, Arirang News.
In the U.S., at least one person was killed and more than 21 were injured in Kansas City, Missouri on Wednesday at a parade for the Super Bowl winning Chiefs. Our Chung Eun-ju has the latest.
A shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl victory parade on Wednesday left one person dead and at least 21 others injured. According to officials, 3 people have been taken into custody for questioning. Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves said authorities are still working to determine the total number of victims. Interim Kansas City Fire Chief said some of the victims were children. According to Children's Mercy Kansas City Senior Vice President Stephanie Meyer, on Wednesday evening, 11 children were being treated at the hospital, 9 of them for gunshot wounds, although all are expected to recover from their injuries. Kansas City Police Chief said officers responded immediately after gunshots were heard. Some 800 law enforcement officers were at the rally and parade that preceded it. The city's fire department was also present to provide medical attention if needed.
Because of bad actors, which were very few, this tragedy occurred, even in the presence of uniformed law enforcement officers who, again, ran towards them and took them into custody.
An estimated 1 million people were in downtown Kansas City celebrating their team's back-to-back Super Bowl championship win when shots were fired west of Union Station, which was where the parade ended at around 2 p.m. local time. Players were still on the stage at the victory rally when the shooting took place. The National Football League team said in a statement that all of the Chiefs players, coaches, and staff who attended the victory rally were accounted for and safe. Kansas City Chiefs players expressed their sorrow on Wednesday over the fatal shooting. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the shooting was at least the 48th mass shooting in the United States this year. In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden reflected on the issue of gun violence in the country, saying, "Today's events should move us, shock us, shame us into action," as he called for gun reform and a ban on assault rifles in the U.S. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Over in Indonesia, Defense Minister and former General Prabowo Subianto appears to have won the country's presidential election. Lee Eun-jin reports.
Indonesian Defense Minister and former General Prabowo Subianto has declared victory in Indonesia's presidential election after unofficial vote counts showed him with a significant lead ahead of his rivals. While the official tally results by the Election Commission are yet to be released, the 72-year-old former Special Forces commander has secured about 58% of the votes, according to 4 pollsters based on quick count ballots from a sample of voting stations across the country. Subianto taking an absolute majority of votes above the threshold of 50% nationwide and 20% in half of the country's provinces means a runoff vote would not be required. The quick counts are based on actual votes at a sample of polling stations across Indonesia. Subianto's rivals Ganjar Pranowo and Anies Baswedan have not yet conceded defeat and urged the public to await the official result, which is expected by March 20th at the latest.
The counting process is not finished. At the moment, the parliamentary and legislative vote counts are still ongoing. Please continue this. I would like to emphasize that I am a true Democrat. We will respect the results of the people's aspirations, because that is the desire of the people, and we have to respect the desire of the people.
Subianto was the front-runner going into the poll. One striking feature of this election was the country's youngest ever electorate. More than half of the voters are either millennials born after 1980 or Generation Zs born after 1996. Analysts say endorsement by President Widodo, popularly known as Jokowi, may have been a deciding factor. Under Widodo, Indonesia has seen a period of remarkable growth, averaging 5% annually, except in 2020 when the economy contracted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. His infrastructure building, health, education, and poverty welfare policies remain highly popular. With Widodo's 36-year-old son as his running mate, Subianto pledged to continue the policies of Jokowi. Critics have accused Widodo of trying to build a political dynasty. At polling stations in Jakarta, ballots are pulled out of boxes by hand, read aloud, and tallied by election workers. It is a labor-intensive task performed in a country of more than 200 million eligible voters spread across an archipelago of more than 17,000 islands. The laborious official count may not be finished for up to a month, but quick counts have provided an accurate picture of results in all 4 presidential elections held in Indonesia since direct voting began in 2004. The new president will be sworn in on October 20th. 이은진, Arirang News.
We stepped back to winter in the space of just a day. The rain that was falling in the morning suddenly turned into heavy snow. After rain and snow all over the country, the weather is getting chillier. The cold below freezing will come around tomorrow morning. The snowstorm will have subsided by tonight in most areas. However, there are some areas on the east coast of Gyeongsangbuk-do province where rain will continue until dawn. Tomorrow, the sky will clear up again, but there is a possibility that wet roads will freeze as temperatures drop below freezing overnight. Please be careful on slippery roads. Seoul and Gwangju will start off at -2 degrees Celsius, Daejeon -5 degrees. Huge temperature gaps will be seen tomorrow. Seoul and Chuncheon will be topping out at 7, Daegu and Busan 10 degrees Celsius. During the weekend, it will start raining all over the country and continue until early next week. Temperatures are expected to rise again early next week with early spring-like weather. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Good night.
Wake up.